is that indeed now there are two teams that are going to be formed from both sides that are going to meet and then after that get into discussions of exactly what basis the three irreducible minimums that Raila Amolo Odinga and the Azimio coalition presented to the Kenya Kwanza government. Let's go back to this first story that we will run for you this morning, which is going to form the basis of our conversation, which is essentially, again, paints a picture of where we are entirely in this conversation for the Raila Amolo Odinga push for the Kenya Kwanza government, in his words, to do something in terms of running this country. Let's jump into it.
Barely hours after the opposition chief Raila Odinga accepted his cardinal competitor call to cease their protracted mass action and give Parliament a chance to resolve the underlying issues, on Monday, President William Ruto met with leaders of both houses to chart the way forward of approaching the bipartisan approach he proposed in his state address on Sunday. President Ruto has expressed confidence that the raised issues will be conclusively solved by the legislators and give his government a chance to deliver its promises. Constitution of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission (IEBC) stands out as a major issue that the bipartisan parliamentary committee is expected to address with urgency. It was a meeting that was attended by the DP Rigathi Gachagua, National Assembly Leader of Majority Kimani Ichung'wah, and his Senate counterpart Aaron Cheruiyot, who have been strongly criticizing the Odinga-led mass action. As Odinga demanded for the release and dropping of charges against his allied lawmakers and supporters who braved the thick tear gas before being arrested, on Tuesday, DPP Nordin Haji moved with speed to drop the charges against Ugunja Member of Parliament Opiyo Wandayi and the cohort. According to Azimio, the DPP has also dropped cases against 200 Azimio protesters.
Yale tumesema hayawi, basi tumeambiwa kwamba serikali imeamua ule maofisi ya ule mkuu wa mashtaka ameamua kuondoa ile kesi kufuatilia ama kwa kutumia kipengele cha sheria inaitwa Criminal Procedure Code, kipengele cha 87A ambacho kinasema kwamba serikali ikiwa haina ushahidi wa kutosha inaweza ondoa ile kesi mahakamani, na ndiposa wameomba.
Samedika, Lookuptv.
Let me introduce then to the conversation Cliff ABOKI this morning. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you.
Happy to have you.
I'm very well.
Yes.
I'm very well.
Fantastic.
The week wouldn't have started any better.
I know.
Yes.
Also, let me introduce the conversation as well. Steve OGUTU, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very good.
Let me start with you, Steve. In this bipartisan conversation that we've now been presented to, is that William Ruto saying, essentially, I say we're going to follow the law when it comes to any conversation that I'm going to have in how we run this government? And I do understand that the ideas or the issues that you're presenting, yes, they would be very close to the Kenyans' hearts. But then let's follow the law. Let's take it back to Parliament. Pick a committee, and then this committee would then give us the way forward. Is that President Dr. William Ruto essentially washing his hands and saying, well, it's never about me and you?
Wow, that's really interesting. But one thing that I think we have to really understand is that this country was heading toward a very bad direction.
Yes.
The statistics are out there about the amounts of money that you were losing every day. Those protests were held, and therefore that is a path that the country wasn't ready to bear its consequences. And I just want to congratulate the two statesmen for that courage. It takes courage to make such a move, to put the country forward, ahead of their own individual interests. And yes, I think that the bipartisan approach as anchored in the law, I think that is the way to go if we are to find sustainable solution to this menace.
Yes.
IEBC, as we know, is a very sensitive, independent institution compared to other institutions because the interests and the stakes are really high. You know, it determines, as we have seen, the stability of a country. And therefore, if major stakeholders, including the public, political parties, and other stakeholders, are not satisfied by how things are done or would love to be involved and feel really satisfied about the process of nomination of the commissioners and people like that, I think it's a really good move. But in relation to the law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I'll be coming back to you because I know the details then are what makes this conversation interesting.
Right.
Now, Cliff, I want to ask you a question around this because then all of a sudden now, we do know exactly what the diehards from both ends have been pushing for. All of a sudden, this is now getting represented to us as some sort of handshake. Should I ask you whether indeed this is the handshake that majority of diehards from both ends have been saying, we do not want that?
They are allowed
Yes.
to interpret this particular truce as they wish. All right? It can be, they can interpret it as they wish, but the bottom line is we have what we are calling a consensus towards peace building and agreement and discussions coming about. That being said, I welcome the move. I welcome the move to actually do what? Do whatever that it takes, following the law and through the right channels,
Yes.
to have a discussion. For those who are talking about handshakes, this is not one of them. This is a different kind of discussion. When we talk about bipartisanism, then we are saying that we need people to discuss things objectively, issues objectively,
Yes.
placing every available information on the table and saying, hey, look here. One, we need peace for our economy to actually prosper. We need peace for whatever that you're talking about, the cost of living to come down and not chaos and anarchy.
Yes.
Those are facts. We need peace. We need peace for stability. We need peace for, in short, we need peace or a more or less calm environment to actually make things move forward. All right? So, having said that, I believe that those who are thinking or feeling so bad or aggrieved by the fact that two people can agree to have a sit down and discuss what ails us, then I think they are becoming emotive and not really arguing sensibly.
That's it.
Yes.
Coming back to you on that, because then the conversation for this getting represented as a handshake also has where it's coming from. Steve, let's look at this particular conversation now. Is this a Raila Amolo Odinga issue? When you look at the three items that have been represented, number one, opening of the IEBC servers is exactly an issue that has even gone to the Supreme Court of this land and they've made a ruling on it. And then number two, it comes and talks about the reconstitution of IEBC. Number three, talks about the cost of living. When you look at these three issues that have been represented by the opposition, do they hold water as issues that the current government should look into, as opposed to issues that are Raila Amolo Odinga's issues?
That's a good question. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to add in onto what my colleague here said. I don't think there's anything wrong with people having a handshake, you know, because we have seen countries that have been on this path, including our very own country years back.
Yes.
We saw how people fought. We saw how people in 2007, 2008, people really died, property destroyed. And it's a case in a number of other countries in the continent, including South Sudan and others. And therefore, the move to have dialogue, to have a sitting and talk about issues that affect this country, especially between two opposing sides, like we have seen, is a welcome move, irrespective of how it's called, whether it's a handshake, a truce, or whatever. Yeah. I think it's a really welcome move that should not be politicized by any Kenyan who mean good for this country, you know. But going back to your question, I think we all agree that the cost of living is very high. Kenyans are struggling to make ends meet. And it's very difficult for everybody. And therefore, I don't think that is just a Raila issue. I think we agree across board that the cost of living is an important discourse that we must have. And the president himself has acknowledged many times that, you know, truth is the cost of living is high. Okay, we have certain factors, including the Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19, that have exacerbated this problem. And I think it's important that we find ways to look at it as a country.
But then, Steve, is somebody want to ask you that on the sidelines of us talking about the high cost of living, that this government has actually given you clear timelines of when they think they're going to have a solution to it? Which therefore begs the question, why are you pushing for it? They've already given you the plan.
That's really interesting. But we know that largely the reason why Raila Odinga has been pushing for this, and the issues that you raised, the other two issues on IBC reconstitution and opening the server, those are largely political. And you may understand why he's a bit disgruntled, you know, and I don't want to just delve even deeper into that.
Yes.
But my concern is really about the cost of living. That is very, very high, and we have to. The other day I was in a meeting engaging in some projects with some county governments in the coastal region, the Taita Taveta County. And the governor there was telling me that, you know, people are dying because they cannot afford food. That was just before the rains, you know. And we have seen, you guys have done wonderful stories about, very sad stories about how people are dying because of lack of food. And that is not something that should be happening in this decade of the 21st century. I think we have to be very proactive as a country, put our measures in place to ensure that at least those basic needs like food, you know, are things that are taken care of. I mean, right now it's raining, but nobody is thinking about how can we harvest these rains and make good use of them, and you know, or get into other irrigation-driven agriculture as opposed to rain-fed agriculture. So we are able to mitigate some of these problems ahead of time.
Pretty much. Be coming back to you on the other two as well. Now, Cliff, on the issue of the cost of living, because it's clear, when this committee is going to come together, whatever it is they're going to talk about is just these three issues, which that's why some critics have said, well, it's an easy job. If they need solutions, essentially the solutions are going to come from that. And if we're going to anchor ourselves within the law, then the law is quite clear on these three issues I'm mentioning here. So it's going to be a very easy job. Some critics have said that. Let's begin on the cost of living. Raila Odinga is pushing the government to reduce the cost of living. And just like Steve is saying, it's a well-known issue. You can actually, that's not a Kenya Kwanza issue or an Azimio issue. That's a Kenyan issue, right?
It's a bipartisan issue.
It's a bipartisan issue, isn't it? If you put it like that. But then, on the silence of that, if you listen to the communication that has come from the government over and over again, they're saying we have a specific timeline that we're going to give you solutions to A, B, C, D. Does that make it an issue then for this bipartisan committee that's going to be formed?
First and foremost, there is politics, and then there is the law.
Yes.
There are those people playing politics with people's lives, and there are those people who are saying, here is the law. Mm-hmm. We are doing things, we are following the processes, we are doing whatever that is needed to be done. All right? When we talk about high cost of living, this did not start with the Ruto administration, did it? Did it? Mm. It actually began when Raila was in this other handshake. True or false? There is an interview that was done, and whatever reasons he was giving, he was throwing in the Russia-Ukraine war, he was throwing in COVID, he was throwing in all that and saying that Ruto and co walikuwa nabweka kama umbwa. In short, we agree the high cost of living did not start with Ruto administration. Let us agree with that first. But now the government of the day today has plans in place to do what? To reduce the high cost of living or to mitigate the high cost of living, right? So for me, Raila using that to run his maandamano and all that, that is politics. He's using one issue which resonates with majority, if not all, to actually say that is what he's running to actually, or pushing for. That is a clear and blatant lie, okay? The high cost of living did not start yesterday, but this government has plans in place to actually resolve whatever that is going on. Let us agree with that, all right? So that is why people are saying it is going to be easy to solve. Reason being, we all agree, there is high cost of living. That is something we all agree. Number two, when we are talking about the reconstitution of the IBC, this is something that has been very thorny when it comes to African elections or Kenyan elections where we live. It is something that we need to say categorically that these people can never be pleased with all this. The constitution of the IBC, the last one, Raila was involved, wasn't he?
He was.
He actually suggested names, didn't he? He did suggest names. At the pretext of they will work for him and not Kenyans. All right? It didn't work that way. So at what point will we agree then that this IBC will work for Kenyans? Because if you can actually recommend people into the commission and then claim again that it is not working, we need to reconstitute it. Let us be honest with Kenyans. When we have these platforms where we are speaking, we need to be honest with Kenyans that if I am involved in the selection of, let's say, a committee, then again I come back and say, this committee is not functioning. Mm-hmm. At what point will I then be satisfied?
But Steve, I want to throw you in here a bit. Just
let me finish this point.
Yes.
At what point will we be satisfied then? It begs the question. And that is what Dr. William Ruto is saying, that what we need is actually to set the processes right such that even if I am gone, these processes will work. And that is why we are talking about the bipartisan discussions that are going to take place, in accordance with the law and are going to take place in Parliament.
Yes. Cliff, I want to point you back and throw you in, like, gentlemen, you have to weigh on this issue as well. If indeed, and this is exactly the question that we're putting on the table, if indeed we were fully satisfied with the appointment of the IEBC commissioners before the 2022 general elections running, then we are coming from the basis of the fact that any other decision that this commission was going to make was going to be respected under law. Steve, let me point you back to what the Supreme Court really argued around the role of the other IEBC commissioners into the decision that the IEBC chair makes on the results. In fact, they were quite clear. Maybe now we need to make it clear on what if commissioners dissent from the decision that the IEBC chair is going to make. Because the courts asked, you're presenting the IEBC chair as a dictator, the final guy, the rubber stamp. Regardless of what happens, I say it because I'm the IEBC chair, and the Constitution gives me that power. So that's the question then that we're asking, that if indeed then the president knew very well that indeed the commission that declared these results was constitutional and they acted within their right, then why are we changing it? Because that's where the Azimio coalition is coming from, that if you indeed are presenting yourselves as a government that follows the law and respects state agencies and commissions, why are you changing it? On what basis?
Right. And it goes to what I'd said earlier, you know, that we may understand why, because IBC compared to other independent institutions is a highly sensitive institution, and therefore I think there's need for us to just have a sober dialogue as a country. And I think the move by President Ruto and Raila hopefully will help to, and that bipartisan proposal will definitely help to, or hopefully help to address some of these issues. Based on the 2022 ruling and the advisory opinion that was issued by the Supreme Court on, I think, the role of the IBC chair vis-a-vis the other commissioners, maybe they should be, under these truths, they should be trying to push for some reforms to help clarify that in the law, so that we try to avoid those kind of lacuna that otherwise will keep on reducing confidence of certain quarters about this important referee when it comes to elections in this country. Yeah.
Pretty much. Cliff, just in 1 minute then, because I also want you to attack that one and then see exactly where we're coming from. The same question. If indeed you respected the independence of this commission, why are you questioning their actions to the point that now you'd form another commission then that is going to deliberate on the actions that within the law were guaranteed? Because that's where the Azimio coalition is coming from, and they're saying, well, reinstate all of them.
Again, there's politics, there's propaganda, and there is reality. Okay. The circumstances in which these commissioners were let go, including the last one, where there was a committee that was set up to actually listen to her case. She stayed in to the last minute.
Yes.
Right? And according to the law, she has the right to do that. She has the right to be heard. She was given that right. The committee was set up to listen to whatever that happened, all right? And she was found guilty, isn't it, by the committee. And so the president had to let her go, all right? There is a process of how to remove these members or these commissioners of the IEBC, there is a process in the law. We don't have a deficit of the law. In Kenya, we don't have a deficit. The thing we have a deficit of is implementation of that law. The Constitution, and I work with this every day and everywhere I go, because this is the Bible of this country in terms of law, all right? There is a lot, and everything that is happening is actually in this law, but we don't implement it. The circumstances in which these 4 commissioners were let go are clear. The elections and how to conduct elections are clear. The results of the polling stations are final. You cannot come and change them at the national returning center or tallying center. You don't change the results. They are final. So the moment you come in and you want to tamper with the results at the national tallying center, and then it is found out that you are blatantly biased, which you're not supposed to be, regardless of whether you are 10-1, the law still stands. The law still is supreme. And that is why the Supreme Court then, going through all the evidence that was there, decided to uphold the results.
Yes.
That...
apologize. I want you to hold on to that particular thought and go for a tiny breather, because I want you to pick on your point from there, and I will remind you exactly where your train of thought was headed. Once we come back then, once Cliff then responds to exactly what this conversation for IEBC is, because we do know the simple rule that Azimio is presenting, reinstate all of them. We do not understand why you let them go. Once we come back then, there is also another conversation that is now coming up. The hardliners stands, that meeting that the president had yesterday with his side of the bipartisan committee included gentlemen who have been hitting the opposition hard, in fact pronouncing themselves on the way they think President Dr. William Ruto should be running this government. Once we come back, is that going to make the committee that is going to run this bipartisan conversation face hurdles? Once we come back right here on The Morning Drift.
Bidii yao ya mtu wa kazini ni dhahiri shairi.
Kazi ni kazi, wesi dharau kazi.
Pelka za kuruzuku familia zao ndicho kibogizo chao.
Haijakuwa rahisi kabisa, imekuwa ni kujikaza, ni kujitolea.
Hapa ndipo tunawapa nafasi kuangazia kwa kina.
Kuna watu ambao bado hawajakubali.
Basi kwa uketo kamili, usikose makala ya Hapa Kazi Tu kila siku ya Jumatatu.
Ajira ni mimi na kazi ni nuru tu ya ajira yangu.
Saa 2 kamili kwenye runinga ya Lookup na Mimosas Okech.
What's going on? Yuko na rafiki yake Musa.
Adam.
Huyu msichana watu wewe umempangia nini?
Nani? Lazima tujue kwa jambo linalofuatia kwetu ni ndoa. Ndoa hii.
Doris, unaongea nini?
Pia, vile hii kazi ilivyo muhimu kwako wewe, hata mimi halikadhalika ni muhimu.
Sitoshi. Kuna mtu hivi sasa anatafuta atakula nini leo?
Mama, nimesoma mama, nimehitimu mama, na vyeti vyote. Kwa nini naishi maisha kweli?
Wewe si family hapa. Kuzaa si kama kwenda haja.
The man!
Good to have you join us on Heart to Heart.
We bring you stories of people who, despite the pressures they experienced, still trusted God to see them through.
The seeds that was sown in me helped me navigate and overcome that period of my life.
New testimonies, new insights, and even better revelation of the good things God has in store for us.
There is always a blessing waiting for someone in every episode.
Jumping right back into it, in case you're just joining us, this is the Morning Drift. My name is SIMBA, Elijah Charles KIAGE. Just before we look at our second story, essentially, that is going to inform the way in which this bipartisan conversation between the opposition and the members of the Kenya Kwanza government is going to take place. Cliff, I want you to clear your point before I jump over to Steve shortly, before we look into the second story. You are at the point of how the Supreme Court pronounced themselves over the way in which that case was presented to them.
Yes. You know, once the Supreme Court then declares that or upholds an election, what it is essentially saying silently is that these guys did wrong, all right? Did wrong. Because at the end of the day, they stood out.
Yes.
And whatever they did, the action they took, split the country right down the middle. That is treasonous. That is very treasonous. These people should actually be in jail right now. That is something that we need to appreciate. Why they're not in jail is actually because God wants them to actually repent or, you know, change their ways. But you cannot be in a commission where you're not supposed to be biased and then you openly show biasness. It doesn't work like that.
Pretty much.
I will mention something about, I will just equate them to our media. You're right? You cannot be openly biased as much as whoever owns you is on this other side. As a journalist, you don't become biased, you become objective. So it is the same thing with the commissioners who are appointed or who are appointed to these particular positions.
Steve, let's look at this case now that is getting presented in front of us. And I want to take you back to a story that the Standard ran yesterday about what was seemingly a private meeting between the two principals, that is Raila Ruto Truce and Dr. William Ruto, on exactly what they needed to do. We can run away from calling this a handshake, but when the details then start to emerge on a meeting supposedly between the two premiers on what the next course of action was going to be, then it again starts to appear that this is a case of Raila Ruto Truce versus the Kenya Kwanza government. Let me point you out to the meeting that Dr. President William Ruto had yesterday. In fact, look at the key figures that the president met yesterday. You can look at Ichung'wa, you can look at the likes of Cheriot, guys who've been hardliners in this conversation. And look at the names that are now bouncing from the Azimio side. We don't have the likes of Martha Karua, we don't have the likes of Senator Oleda Makina, who have also been hardliners in this conversation.
Right.
Steve, are we going to run away from the fact that whether we like it or not, this is a matter between Raila Ruto Truce and the Kenya Kwanza government?
I mean, of course. And for me, I think we really cannot, we can't run away from it.
Yes.
You know, and we have seen, you know, how you know, these kind of campaigns that they have been holding and the protests they've been holding, the kind of statements that they've been holding that are very hardlined, so to speak. And in a times like this, you look at who does the buck stop, and in this case, it's Ruto. It's not even Raila Odinga. Ruto is the president of this country, and therefore it reaches a point where you have to demonstrate leadership, because then even the image of this country globally was not going in the right direction. I mean, investors were, running away.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't want to come and throw in your funds or your investment into a chaotic country like we were experiencing a few days ago. And therefore, I think the president, out of wisdom, thought it wise to put the country first. That,
yes,
most importantly, and that's why I said this was a statesman move by the two leaders. You also cannot, just look down upon Honorable Raila. I mean, this is someone who's it goes without saying, one of the top leaders we have in this country, and commands such a huge following. Actually, I think the difference in the previous election was about 200,000 or 300,000 thereabout, and that's very minimal, right? But nonetheless, it was a defining difference between the two leaders. But what I'm trying to say here is, this is someone who also commands nearly half of this country, and therefore his voice and him telling his lieutenants to just pause and reason with the government, I think that should be applauded.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cliff, I'm going to jump to you as well. Now, here's the thing: are we too fast to calling this a truce, Steve? Because number one, we haven't seen the results of this bipartisan committee. Number two, we haven't even known who's going to be part of this committee. Are we too fast to say, well, whatever reactions that those two premiers have actually presented to us is statesmanship in a sense, but then still we haven't seen the results? We are here talking about how some of these irreducible minimums will not make sense from a point of view, because here we are talking about the solutions that the government is giving us about some of these issues that both sides want to go in and talk about.
Right.
Are we too fast to call it? And by the way, Steve, you should remember that Raila Odinga has introduced a timeline to it. 7 days. Give me a solution.
Right.
Or else I'm going back again.
Right, and I think we should be patient. Something like this, I don't know, I don't think would happen as soon as we wanted. To achieve sustainable progress,
yes,
even in terms of a situation like this, requires strategies like the one they're putting in place, and I'm sure that's going to take some time. But I may also speculate that they had some detailed discussion, of course, with the president, and maybe there are a lot of things that we still don't know. But as time progresses, we'll get to know. But I think for me, the most important thing that we should focus on is the cost of living. I think they should that should be the focus, and I think that is what bothers majority of Kenyans. Maybe you and I can afford breakfast, can afford like the 3 meals in a day or more, but out here, people are struggling. There are people who are going weeks without food. The other day I was watching a news clip by one of the media houses here, how old people, some man in his I think 80, accompanied his grandchildren to eat, to have lunch with them in school, because he couldn't afford food, and that paints a very bad picture. Yes. For us as a country. I think for me, the bottom line is, even in this truce or whatever, or handshake, how, you know, should really be centered around how do we make the life better for Kenyans.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Cliff,
yeah.
Let's paint the picture. I mean, the movie is clear.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we can do from our end is just to read on exactly where this is heading. Let's talk about the stance of the headliners in this particular bipartisan conversation, because we know also that might be, or as we expect, will be a game changer. Look at the people or the leaders that President Dr. William Ruto had a meeting with yesterday.
Yeah.
Hardliners in this conversation. When critics or most political analysts are saying, well, the best you can do, Dr. President William Ruto, is remove the hardliners from this conversation. Because then if you introduce hardliners to this conversation, the likes of Ichung'wa, who've called on for the arrest of former Premier Raila Ruto Odinga,
which is
the likes of Cheriot, all right, then you might not break the duck when it comes to this conversation. And look at the names that we've seen that have been proposed from this side as well, for them there's mere coalition. Now we have rumors that Senator Leda Makina, who's another hardliner, is going to be part of this committee that's going to be talking about issues that have been presented. Are we setting the stage for a no solution scenario? Which is why I asked, are we being too quick by calling this move by the two statesmanship in a sense?
Simba, there is one thing you need to understand.
Yes.
And which is fact if you look at it from an objective angle. You cannot go out and bring a stranger to actually speak your case or fight for you in a battle, can you?
Yes.
You bring in your lieutenants, people who've been with you, people who understand what you want, all right?
But they've made it clear.
Yeah.
Cliff, they have made it clear. They've made themselves clear, Cliff.
It is like this.
Yes.
Again, I'll go back and tell you, there is politics, and then there is the law.
Yes.
Okay? If you bring politics, if you're playing politics, then the other side plays politics. You get? That is political. When we come to the political stage, then we play politics. Okay? You can't bring a technocrat argument in a political argument. You bring a political argument into a political argument to understand each other. Because you understand how it is done. If a technocrat meets a technocrat, then they understand each other. All right? But you cannot go ahead and bring technocrats who don't understand how the politics of this whole game is being played.
Yes.
And expect to get results that are going to more or less be win-win. We are not supposed to be blind to the fact that we have people who are diehard supporters of this person A, and diehard supporters of person B. In fact, person B doesn't have diehard supporters. He has passers-by. This other side has diehard supporters. You get the idea? So when we are having this particular discussion on bipartisan, more or less discussions, whereby we are talking about cooperation and agreements, which are going, an agreement which is going to come out of it, and these two sides have actually decided to cooperate and see where they can iron out one or two issues that bring about the differences they have. You cannot bring strangers into that game or into that table. You bring people who've been on it. And let me just to clear up that point then. Whatever that he said, if you listen to the statement of the president, he said that it is going to go through bipartisan discussions through parliament. And so these things are going to be done in parliament. All right? Whatever we discuss here, we take it to parliament.
It's going to go back to parliament.
And then we now iron it out in parliament. Objectively.
Objectively.
You get?
And that's where my next question comes from then, Cliff.
Yeah.
And Steve, I would like you to also weigh in on this. Cliff, who's the majority in parliament? Because we do know this is a special committee that has been selected from both sides.
Yes.
Talk about, come up with solutions. Then some of these now are going to go back to Parliament.
Yes.
When we are talking about who the majority in Parliament is, don't we know the answer to that? Don't we know?
That is why we are saying.
Don't we know the power of politics in Parliament currently, Steve? So what are we looking at? And in respect to the timeline that both sides are working with now, 7 days.
Yeah, and it will be really interesting to see how that turns out. But I think it's also good to understand that most of these things can only work if there is a blessing from the top leadership, whether it's President Ruto on the other side or Raila on this other side.
Yes.
So it depends on the kind of directive they issue to their supporters and to their MPs in Parliament. If the President says, we think that issues that have been raised here bipartisan and let's support it, they will support it. We've seen this before.
Yes.
And therefore, I think that whatever they discuss, if the solution they suggest are things that are meant to make us move forward as a country and avoid this kind of chaos, because we can't afford to be in this forever, I think that should be supported.
But you like to think so, isn't it? Cliff, point you back to that. And that's why I'm saying, is it a game of delay that is getting played by the government? Because if it's that, okay, we're going to give you that committee, the bipartisan committee that is going to talk about these issues. Good. We're going to stick to the 7 days. Good. But then after that, go back to Parliament. Let me point you to a picture of exactly what happened to House Business when the Azimio Coalition was out protesting. They were not in Parliament, Cliff. Completely. Are we going to play dumb to how Parliament runs in this country?
We should control this narrative like this. This is how we should say it. We pray for the best, okay?
Yes.
We hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, right? That's normally a good way to do things. When we go to Parliament, and when it has already been said from the top leadership that we are doing these things objectively, our discussions here in Parliament, our debate here in Parliament is going to be objective. Then we expect, as much as that is actually our expectation, we expect people to be what? Objective in Parliament. Don't look at which party you come from. These are the issues which you already know about. Now, this is how far we've come in terms of our discussions with these particular representatives. What do you think? All right. Then the discussions that will be in Parliament should be objective, and we should appreciate whatever results come from there. Because here we expect everybody has been left free to actually discuss these issues. So we should also respect that as well.
Yes.
If we don't,
yes,
then we are bound to take ourselves back to we don't trust the leaders that we elected.
Yes. Cliff, they tell me that your microphone is a bit ish, but they're going to come back and talk about it, but I'm going to jump back to you.
Okay.
Steve, yes, Parliament, is it a smart move from Dr. President William Ruto? Yes, committee, let's go back to Parliament. Parliament might take a long time to give us an answer.
I think that, in my view, is the best route. That is the legal route that we have to follow.
In respect to what's going on in the country.
Right. And I also want to believe that maybe during their discussion with Honorable Raila,
yes,
I'm sure they discussed this. Like, so we know who controls the majority in Parliament. And therefore, maybe how will we navigate this when we get there? I'm sure these are details that they might have discussed. But most importantly, I think it's really key that the process, as has been promised, remains bipartisan.
Yes.
And the leaders in Parliament should be led to deploy their conscience the right way and make the right move.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
In 45 seconds, Cliff, what do we honestly expect as Kenyans from this bipartisan committee? And could you paint for us a picture, going by the history of Parliament in this country? It is Kenya Kwanza versus the Azimio politics. We do know that whether we like it or not, once it goes back to the National House, it's going to be about Kenya Kwanza versus Azimio.
We should be optimistic. That's my take. We should be optimistic in that and respect whatever that comes out of it. Otherwise, we'll be oscillating on the same issues till Jesus comes back. Okay? We have decided to discuss these things. We have agreed as a committee or representatives that this is it. This is what we're going to take to Parliament and discuss further, okay? And see what Parliament agrees with, and then we move on, right? That is something that we should now leave to Parliament, who are lawmakers, right? To actually give us now whatever they discuss and agree on, okay? But we should respect it. We shouldn't again come out and start saying, bado mapambano. And yet, we have agreed that this is the way we are going to go.
See, Cliff is being another hardliner.
No. I'm not being a hardliner. I'm just saying, let us respect. Let us respect.
Yes.
Because then what is the need? Where is the need? What is the need of us doing that?
Steve, in 15 seconds of this step out.
No.
Yes, in 15 seconds of this step out. In 15 seconds, yes.
I think the truth is, whatever we're experiencing goes beyond what we are discussing here. It's not as easy as it may appear.
Yes.
It's not all the time that the legal route will, sometimes politics also play a role. And therefore, just getting it to a point where you are able to say, okay, this is what the law says, and this is what has happened, but we can dialogue and still find a solution around it. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming by. Guess what? I would like to have you back when they finally form this committee. So we look at the individuals who've been presented in this committee. And then guess what? They have the burning through days. They were given 7 days by the Azimio coalition. That's exactly what we're going to work with. After these 7 days, then we're going to come back and see exactly.
But that is where we are wrong.
What's that?
It is not him giving us the deadline. As a country.
But
it is not them.
Are we not then becoming headliners in it?
No.
Again?
Yeah, like when you start saying, oh, I'm giving you 1 week or next week, No. That cannot be the case.
I think
that shouldn't be the case.
10 seconds, please. Sign out.
I think most importantly, we also need to see this bipartisan committee also talking about the issue of the cost of living. How can we reduce the cost of living?
Yes, pretty much. I like to step out. My director is killing me. Guess what? Take them back to the time that it joined us right here on our Lookuptv's morning brief. That is at Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. On Facebook, on Twitter, once you're there, comment. I know majority of comments have come in. Guess what? We're going to look at them with Ian Kitani shortly on what's trending online and what we shall be focusing on right here as a newsroom. Good morning.
Nairobi County, are you ready for the biggest TV roadshow